All right. So think a thought without looking or doing anything like that. Think a thought of your hand. Now take a deep breath. Let it out. And look at your hand directly. Seeing like every single detail that's there without noting it. Does the thought, my hand, have anything to do with the direct seeing of your hand? Now, without looking, close your eyes and feel your hand. Feel the sensation, feel the vibration. Now, with thinking again, does that have anything to do with the thought, my hand? Okay, now look at and feel the sensation, vibration, and see, really see, openly see, without an idea of my hand clouding what I'm seeing. My hand. Outside of thought is seeing and feeling two different senses. We think that we have 5 different senses, and maybe we believe that there's something called a sixth sense. The actuality of what the sixth sense is the reality that there aren't 5 senses ever experienced. Now, we have never, and I should ask this as a question, have you ever experienced the world through any means other than the 5 senses? If you lose your senses, if you lose consciousness, sometimes you can lose one sense and retain some others. The world is just experienced through that one sense. But again, there aren't 5 separate senses. So we are the awareness behind it, and we've never directly experienced the world through 5 different senses. So the actuality of now as in not separate from past or future, outside of thinking, is there is no separation. So take your hand and place it on your leg. Are there 2 sensations? 1, my hand, 2, my leg. Or is there just borderless feeling? So place your hand on something that you do not consider to be you. So I'm putting my hand on the moss. Is there directly one sensation, my hand, and a second sensation, the moss? Or is it borderless feeling? This is the importance of feeling, that it is direct. It does not lie. And thought can come up with a whole bunch of other things and project it onto its reality so that even the senses confirm that this is true. You can't trust what source can be seen. So we can see the eyes and we observe the brain and the eyes, and we say that the brain-eye connection is the source of sight, and that the body that is behind that is the source, or the seer. But the body, the seer, is always just the seen for nobody, for awareness. So what is source can have no source. And when we point at a source we can see, ears, eyes, even the idea of nerves or skin, we are using source awareness to point this out. And so there is no seen without the seen. They are seamlessly one. And this isn't philosophy. It isn't anything that you can be convinced of. But when you drop the thoughts of what you know yourself to be and what you know your experience to be as and be attributed to, it just is. And so we can explain non-duality and enlightenment in such fantastical, unbelievable terms. But the truth of the matter is, what is this? What is consciousness? What is awareness? These are questions that cannot be answered because who is asking? It's source looking back at itself, but if it looks back at itself and says that the seen is the seer, it misses it. It covers over it completely. So when I'm directly looking at my hand and directly feeling it, it is what I would call or describe love. There's no tensions in it. It's healing. I'm attributing things to it. But it's devoid of any problems or any separation. And love knows no separation. It knows no exclusion. So if you were a kid and you had a candy bar and you wanted to have the biggest piece of the candy bar, you wanted a bigger piece than somebody else, you would cut the candy bar you would split the candy bar. You would split what is whole into two lesser pieces so that you could then compare the two pieces and say one is greater than and one is less than. And this is when we think ourselves to be a piece or a part. This is the sort of comparison that we then get all lost in the world and our interactions with other people, rather than being experienced as love and healing and as not an interaction between two separate selves in that direct seeing, knowing. Instead, we start thinking thoughts of separation and comparison and how we can stack up. And thought thinks that it can be both the comparer and the compared, but there are not two of you. In fact, there isn't even one of you. And so why in non-duality do we say it's not two? We don't say that it's one, even though there are beautiful spiritual teachings that talk about oneness, and I'm not discrediting them whatsoever. What we're saying is mistaking the separate self as one, as having a border around it, because one is an integer. So in order for me to have two, I have two ones. In order for me to have three, I have three ones. One is the basis, and to create one, I draw a border around the one. If I have one piece of paper, it's known by what is not paper around it. It's defined by its borders. And non-duality is saying that what allows those borders to even be seen, it itself is borderless. Ask yourself, does feeling have any borders? Does your line of vision have any borders? If you look for them, they just move. To even your line of vision, even to that one sense, has no borders. But then we forget ourselves as being prior to that and take ourselves to be the seen. And then we can compare. And so I can look at my hand and I can say, wow, I have really dry skin and my hands are getting wrinkly, and like I don't know anything about like how to do my nails. I've never done my nails, and yeah, that's kind of like backwoods girl or something. And I like feel all these things you see. And so these are the kinds of thoughts we have about ourselves that we don't listen to feeling. We don't realize that they feel bad to think. This isn't to say that I can't be like, I want to find a better brand of hand cream, or like maybe wear some dishwashing gloves or something like that. Like, you can totally go for what is wanted. Now, rather than finding fault for things, we realize that when we pay attention to feeling, we realize that if we go in the direction of what is wanted instead, then everything becomes, rather than everything just being torn apart. And we don't realize how destructive our thoughts seem to be. Now, do they actually destroy anything? No, they don't. But when we come home to that place of feeling, there's a complete dropping of tensions, and that is the place of no resistance, and that is the place where all true knowledge can come about for us. And just like the sixth sense, there are no separate senses. So if we believe all of our knowledge comes through 5 separate senses, we miss a lot. But still, there is this direct, without them being separate and without them being owned by anyone, there is this direct knowing that when we align our thinking with that, in other words, when we question the basis of thoughts that don't feel good to think, wow, my hands look terrible, I don't compare to these people as I should, etc., etc., we no longer lose that energy. We no longer lose our focus to those, and we realize that we are directly creating, directly behind, prior to all of this, and that it is for us, and it is loved completely. No questions asked. When I was a kid, one of my favorite books was Grover's Resting Places, and it had, like, Grover goes through his messy toy box and he goes through all these different resting places, and it has like places in the book you can rest your ear and your nose and your forehead and everything else. And the book was like really amazing and calming, and just a book I never forgot. And it was because it wasn't just telling me a story, like it was actually inviting me to feel. What a brilliant kids book. And so this is yoga, this is meditation, but it's here all the time. And there's wonderful practices that give us the opportunity to tap into it. But it's when we don't understand that the actuality of it, of thought, of emotions, of feeling, and don't know when to come home, that we don't know when to drop these tensions, which create this like perpetual wind up, which creates this momentum. And then we have motivations to go and secure things in our life, like trying to get the bigger piece of a candy bar, not realizing that by accepting and settling with living with those tensions, we're cutting off the whole. So we've got 2 smaller parts for the luxury of trying to secure one part as the larger part than the other. And this is not fulfilling. And you hear people in self-actualization and everything, and they have the message, don't settle. Don't settle. You shouldn't settle. You shouldn't settle anything for the less than this, without drawing a line through it, without defining, without any separation, without going anywhere, without thinking anything. And you can create. Oh, you can create. This is the creator, the created, all wrapped into one. Oh, you can create. Nothing is lost. But when you come back home and it seems like nothing's happening, nothing's being done, that nothing is everything. Like the pupil of your eye, talking about senses here, the pupil of your eye is a hole through your eye. It's a black hole that we look into when we're looking deep into somebody's eyes. Out of nothing, that's what lets the light in and allows everything to be seen. Nothing is prior to everything. And when we drop the thoughts, we drop the tensions. I can't tell you. You'll have to find out for yourself.